Lemkin Solitaire and Equalizer seeders and planters offer disruptive innovation like vertical banding, dry and or liquid onboard fertilizer, and great prices. Go to lemkindemo.com for more information and to request a demo.
Let's talk about the grocery code of conduct. This is something we've heard a lot about in the past, and we're getting a little bit closer to, I guess, bringing it to fruition. And a familiar name to those of you that are longtime listeners of Real Ag Radio, we're talking to Karen Proud. She is president and adjudicator of the Office of the Grocery Code or Grocery Sector Code of Conduct. Karen, it's great to chat with you again.
Yeah, lovely to be back on your show, Sean, even if it's in a slightly different capacity than last time.
Okay, so I guess in this role, what does creating this Office of the Grocery Code of Conduct, I guess, what does this look like? What are we embarking on as a country here?
Well, so last year, all of the grocers and suppliers finally, after many, many years of work, came together and agreed upon this grocery code of conduct. And we're not the first country to do this. Has been done in the UK and in Australia. So we have this code that has been agreed on by all parties. Now this office that I am leading has been created or is in the process of being created, and our office is tasked with sort of enforcing the code, working with the different parties to address issues that might arise through the code. But I've been on the job for a week, and there's a lot to do just to get the office up and running. And then the code itself comes into sort of force in June, but there's going to be, a period of adjustment where we're going to focus on education and making sure that people are ready for the code to really be fully enforced.
So code already created.
Code already created. It's been in the works for 4 or 5 years now, perhaps even longer. So the code is written. The office is now created, but lots of things that we still need to put in place in order to make this all happen. Various processes, guidance documents, things like that, that still need to be created for this to really start to work.
And you said educate. Who are you educating? Is that suppliers to grocery stores? Is that the grocers themselves? Who needs to get up to speed?
So the code applies, it's a reciprocal code, which is different from in the UK. The code is just for the large grocery stores. But in Canada, this code applies to all suppliers to grocery and all of the different grocery stores. So the large folks as well as the small independents. So part of the role of the office is to ensure that all of those who are party to the code understand the code, are aware of the code, and understand the benefits and how to use the code as they move forward. And so we are talking the large grocery stores, the big suppliers, but also the small independents that who really are hoping and counting on this code to help make their dealings better, more transparent, more predictable, and more fair.
Who does the code benefit? Is it those suppliers or is it all stakeholders? Just for some of our audience, they're not following this on a daily basis. They hear a lot about, the grocery code of conduct, grocery code of conduct, but they don't actually know what is this actually doing?
Well, so all parties to the code will benefit, and I'll just give a couple of examples. So this is a reciprocal code, so suppliers have some onus within the code, as do retailers. And I'll give you a really good example that I think your audience can probably understand and see the benefit to them. Think about the small independent grocers. And when we look back to COVID, where there were supply constraints and there were issues with these small independent grocers potentially getting the supply of the products they needed to service their customers because those supplies were perhaps going to the larger grocery stores. This code ensures that suppliers take into account the small independent grocers when we're dealing with issues of supply constraints. So you think about the toilet paper, and everybody was rushing out to buy it. Um, Under this code, suppliers would have to honor their commitments to the small independents just as they honor their commitments to the larger grocery stores. And that helps those small independents ensure they have supply for their customers who may be in more rural parts of the country, and where the small independent grocer is their only ability to buy the products they need. So that's just one example of where this code is helping to ensure fairness in dealings between suppliers and grocers. And so that's a great benefit to the small independent grocers. The larger suppliers, as they're dealing with their customers, the retailers, this code addresses some of the concerns that they've had over time around how those dealings go, how those negotiations happen, what's fair when it comes to fines and penalties and things like that for doing business. And this code aims to address some of those longstanding issues, build better relationships between suppliers and retailers, and drive sort of innovation and access within the system.
Through the last 24 months, where there's been a lot more concern about inflation, one of, as people were talking about food prices, a lot of times the grocery code of conduct would get sort of weaved into that conversation. But lowering of grocery prices is not an objective of this code.
It is not an objective of the code. And I think that is where some misinformation is out there. And that's going to be a role of the office, is to try and clarify what is the code, what is it not. When you think about inflation, there are so many issues that contribute to food inflation. We've talked about some of those in the past. This grocery code is not going to fix that. This code is really about the business to business relationships, improving those, giving access, better access potentially to some of the small suppliers, to the larger grocery stores, better negotiations within those sectors, not relating to price. That's we're staying out of that, and that's a good thing. But yes, I think to your point, there's been a lot of conversation that this code is somehow going to reduce prices. That's not the goal of the code. Whether that happens, great down the line, but that is not the focus of the code.
What does the adjudication process look like?
Well, that is one of the things that we still have to put in place. So a key element to the grocery code of conduct is the dispute resolution mechanism. So what happens when there's a conflict between a supplier or a retailer? How does that get elevated within the companies first, and then how does that come to the office? That is something that we are still working on. Our goal is to have that process finalized before June, to really indicate sort of when does the adjudicator step in to make that decision. It should be noted that if you look at the UK, where the grocery code of conduct started, the adjudicator in the first 5 years really only had to address two issues when it came to like doing an investigation. And so, the adjudication part of all of this should really be a very small part of my job. My job is really to work with both parties to ensure that there's clarity around the provisions of the code, to sort of influence those conversations when I feel that there's maybe misinterpretations of the code, and really to work with all parties to make sure that they're doing the proper training and have the proper processes in place. And while the dispute resolution mechanism is really essential to have in place, my hope is that having to go through that process is a rarity.
So for a lot of the farmers that are listening that are in this market of, taking their production and getting it onto a store shelf, and maybe directly or indirectly, what do they need to know about this grocery code of conduct?
Well, they need to know it exists. They need to know that the Office of the Grocery Sector Code of Conduct also exists, and we are here to help with providing resources to anyone who deals directly within the supply chain with the grocery stores, to make sure they have the tools within the code that are going to help them in their business dealings. And so if there are farmers who are selling directly to grocery stores, and there's quite a few of those, understanding the code and how it applies to them, I think, is really key. And so as we're rolling this out, the office is going to be providing resources, contact information for us. And I would encourage all of those, within the code, or who might benefit from the code, to reach out if they need the information, need training. We're going to be looking at developing a list of organizations who are able to provide training. We're developing resource guides, and so I would say, keep an eye on the office as we get up and running. We will be providing that information.
Great stuff. Karen, thanks a lot for joining us here today on Real Ag Radio. Really appreciate it, and we'll definitely be chatting again soon to get an update on how you're progressing.
Thanks so much.